Can We Afford the Green New Deal? By Yevhen Nersisyan and L. Randall Ray. Preface. As the scope of the climate crisis unfolds and the worst-case warming scenarios begin to look unavoidable, some are debating a sweeping approach to climate policy in the form of a Green New Deal. The idea is to combine a comprehensive set of policies designed to reverse climate change, public investment to create a carbon-neutral energy policy, retrofitting buildings and updating infrastructure to increase energy efficiency, with measures like the job guarantee that would aid vulnerable households in this transition to a more sustainable economic model. Predictably, concerns have been raised about the fiscal costs of such a sprawling program. Critics argue that the Green New Deal must be paid for, that is, rendered deficit neutral or close to it, and that the necessary tax increases and other offsets would be economically and or politically damaging. One problem with these objections is that they commonly fail to consider the estimated costs of inaction or insufficient action. Yevhen Nersisyan and senior scholar L. Randall Ray argue there is another fundamental problem with these concerns about the Green New Deal's purported financial burden. In their view, the question of whether we can afford this battery of programs is not best answered by merely summing up all the proposed spending commitments. According to Nersisyan and Ray, there are no meaningful financial barriers to taking action. The U.S. government, they argue, can make whatever payments are required. Rather, the question is whether sufficient real resources, workers, plant and equipment, raw materials, can be marshaled to implement the Green New Deal. Nersisyan and Ray find a model for their approach in John Maynard Keynes's How to Pay for the War, 1940, not just based on the grave stakes involved, but for the approach Keynes takes to analyzing the cost of the endeavor in terms of real rather than primarily financial resources. Following Keynes, their argument is that if the resource needs of this series of policies exceed the resources that can be made available, inflationary pressures will develop. It is only in such circumstances that tax increases need be considered, and, as the authors emphasize, taxes are not the only means of countering inflation. Moreover, in such a scenario, the purpose of raising taxes would not be to raise revenue. Reducing the impact on government deficits is not the goal, but to effectively curtail aggregate demand. In this policy brief, Nersisyan and Ray attempt to produce estimates of the resources required and available for implementation of the Green New Deal's major elements, including estimates of the net resource impacts of the greening projects, the job guarantee, a single-payer system along the lines of Medicare for All, and the curtailing of military adventurism. Their analysis takes into account that some resources would be released or shifted from one use to another. Investment of resources in exploration and generation of non-renewable energy would decline, for instance. While in some instances, resources would be created by newly implemented programs, such as the greening projects carried out by participants in the Job Guarantee Program. Overall, Nersisyan and Ray find that the net increase in resource use due to the Green New Deal's implementation would amount to roughly 1.3% of GDP on an annual basis. Even if not offset by tax increases or other measures, this may not cause significant inflation, they argue. There is still substantial unused capacity in the U.S. economy, and potential growth can itself be raised, just as potential output has been degraded by running below capacity for so long. So potential output can be raised by running the economy closer to full employment. Nevertheless, with so many moving parts and unavoidable uncertainty, Nersisyan and Ray, following a related proposal by Keynes, recommend a policy of deferred compensation designed to reduce consumption in case inflation poses a problem. A temporary employee-side payroll tax surcharge averaging 4.6%, applied in a progressive manner, would be paired with higher Social Security benefits, once again progressively allocated, to be dispersed when the inflationary danger has passed. With the payroll tax surcharge included, they calculate the Green New Deal would roughly net out to zero in terms of the overall increase in resource use. Nersessian and Ray provide a first attempt at doing the real resource budgeting they believe is necessary to discern the limits of the possible in this case, to determine what this nation can afford in the fight to reverse climate change and ensure a just transition. Given the complexity of the exercise and the uncertainties involved, including the scope of final program design, their goal is less to insist on the particular estimates they arrive at than it is to argue for the necessity of changing the framework by which we analyze the cost of significant public policy changes. As always, I welcome your comments. Dimitri Papadimitriou, President, January 2020.